Hi, everyone. I'm excited. It's 2021, and I'm starting a new series of conversations with a lot of really interesting people, including my friend Joseph, Joe, just Joe.
We can just go by Joe.
Okay, Joe Kleman. Did I
You
say
got
it
it. You
right?
nailed it.
I was practicing in my head. Who is a death enthusiast, which I love because I'm obsessed with death too. I've read so many different books, and it's just a daily exploration for me. So I'm so curious, how old were you when you started to become interested in death?
Well, it was hasn't been really that long. I would say like the last 4 years, it really got sunk into it. My dad was when the in the course of leaving here. Um,
Yeah.
my dad almost died 11 times before he died.
Oh my.
So I was around it. He lost three brothers, a brother-in-law, and a sister in like 5 years.
Mm.
So between that and then he had a kidney transplant that lasted 31 years.
Oh wow.
And then in the course of that time, he had one truck accident. He drove dump trucks for the county,
Yeah.
and he had one accident prior to the transplant, and then another accident in 2000. But the first one, and I was about 7 years old. He rolled a dump truck end over end 3 times, like fully loaded.
Oh my.
And then the second one, both people ran stop signs. And then the second one, he rolled it onto its on the he had 13 tons of asphalt on the back of the truck, rolled it onto its side and slid it into a power pole and
Ooh.
scalped himself ear to ear. So he had like 70 staples across the top of his head.
Whoa.
And it was so fascinating to watch him go through like I guess these big accidents, and he would just pop up like he was being life flighted for the second one, and my mom raced to the hospital, gets to the ER and whatever. They're like, come back here, he's back here. And he was just sitting up on the bed and going, hey, what's up? Glad you made it or whatever, It was just like, what the hell is going on?
Wow.
But one of the funny stories to that I didn't learn until at the funeral when he died in November of 19. So right before COVID.
Mm.
And but the first paramedic on the scene was this guy named John Love, and he actually was the funeral director at the Love Funeral Home.
Mm.
And I didn't realize that when he showed up, my dad saw him. He goes, what the hell are you doing here?"
Oh.
Because he was still alive. He was
Yeah.
just laying there, And but that case, the only reason he survived because they travel in like packs. So there's really two or three trucks traveling together.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy that was still behind him saw the whole accident happen and called the paramedics, and then was holding towels on his head to keep him from like bleeding out.
Wow. Incredible.
So yeah, they kept telling him to get away from the truck because the power lines were down around it and stuff like that, and he stayed with them the whole time. They actually got a certificate from the Ohio governor
Mm.
for saving his life. So uh,
You came close. You came to be like a witness to almost death many times.
yeah, many times. And
Yeah.
then I've had my own like when people call like near death experiences where they're like, they almost died themselves and they like kind of
Mhm.
leave this world. I
Yep.
can't claim that. However, I've had almost a dozen situations where like death was knocking at your door, or
Mm.
you're like, whew, like, I don't know how I got out of that one.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so many situations. Well, so I was diagnosed 20 years ago as a narcoleptic.
Mm-hmm.
So I've since like gotten a lot better with that and understanding myself and what I need and different medications and stuff. But before that, I would fall asleep a lot driving,
Mm.
and that's what eventually sent me to the sleep doctor because I was like, something's not right. Like I can't even drive the 20 miles to go home
Mm-hmm.
without like having an incident or like having to stop and like sleep for 20 minutes or something. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many cases where like I would like wake up just in time, like I'm seeing the whites of someone's eyes like as they're coming head on into me,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
so many situations like that. I hit a median wall on the interstate 80 miles an hour, like fell asleep and just like drifted into it. um One of the crazy ones I had, I was with a friend of mine, and we had a destination picked, but I in my head I was going to the fair, to the farmers or to the flea market, not the farmers market. So then we pulled off this exit, and she was kind of messing with the GPS, and like the light had turned, was red anyways. There was nobody behind me, so I wasn't in a hurry to go anywhere.
Mhm.
And so the light changes green for probably like 5 or 10 seconds. And I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to go. You can keep messing with the GPS. We'll just get moving again.
Mhm.
So there's two lanes with a median in between. And the light had been green already for like at least 5 seconds or so,
Yep.
where I was like, oh, I should get going because, the light's green. And I go through the first two lanes, and I'm like watching the guy coming onto the on-ramp. So him and I have locked eyes because we're the two people that have like, I have the right of way, and he's yielding to me.
Right.
And as I come into the next two lanes, this car like full speed just like flies through the intersection.
Ooh.
And something like I just slammed on the brakes. Like I have no idea what made me slam on the brakes. I just slammed on the brakes. And my friend looked at me that was sitting in the passenger seat because she would have been hit like directly. And she looked at me like dead in the eyes. It's a weird, pun intended, but looked me dead in the eyes. She's like, you just saved my life.
Oh, wow.
She's like, how did you know to stop? And I'm like, I have no idea.
I have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have so many of those stories like that where you're like, I guess I'm supposed to be here. Like, I don't know, like
For some reason.
it's wild to me.
Yeah.
So I've
Have
had
you
so
read
many
a
experiences
lot
like that. What's
about
that?
death? Have you read a lot about death?
Actually, one of my favorite things, and I'm sure they have them up by you. It's you ever heard of Death Cafe?
No. What's that?
So Death Cafe is an international organization that's trying to normalize the discussion of death and dying.
Yeah.
So they're around here like every 4 to 6 weeks she'll have one, and it's at a funeral home. And
Cool.
there's it's not a grief group, it's a science group.
Oh,
So
neat.
there's oncology nurses and doctors and funeral directors and death doulas and anybody that's like around it.
Mhm.
And we have food and we hang out and we discuss, like we bring up questions, and it goes into this roundtable conversation of like, what is this? How does this work? And then someone's like, oh, I have experience in that. And they answer that question, and then it just keeps like
Mm,
unfolding for 2.5 hours.
that's so cool. Death Cafe.
Yeah. So there's another guy I follow that is really big into like the flow world. And that's kind of where my business is in like flow,
Mhm.
for helping people achieve that or find it and stay in it longer. And there's a thing going around now called Death by Dinner,
Hmm.
where you're put randomly at a table with people, and there's a sheet on the table that has 10 questions on it that are revolving around death.
Oh.
And you have to answer, the conversation has to stem from that piece of paper. That way the conversation stays about that topic.
Oh, that's amazing. Have you been to one?
I haven't been to a Death by Dinner. I actually mentioned it to the woman that does the Death Cafe if she'd
Yeah.
be interested, and she said she had heard of it, and like we had discussed it years ago, but they never kind of circled back around to it.
Fascinating.
But yeah, so for me it was like it was so interesting watching, comparing my first experience going, like the first two sessions I went, compared to other people I've brought for their first session.
Mm-hmm.
And we always joke around about, like, if you actually get 3 people to join you at a Death Cafe, you get a toaster kind of thing. It's like you invite a lot of people, but like it's not really a topic that everybody goes, hey, I want to go check that out.
Yeah, yeah.
So but yeah, so it's interesting to watch how much conversation happens from people that are new
Right.
as to the people that have been there 3 or 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
or 3 or 4 or 5 sessions. Because you're like the way I look at death and the way I look at like the ego, is that the ego is self-preservation, right? It's our identity of ourselves from nature, our identity from ourselves from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say like when you use psychedelics, like the ego dissolution that they talk about, and I was like, to me, the most beneficial ego dissolution is the one you can get sober. Right. And those hit us all the time. It's like death of a family member or a parent, or like a brush with their own mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And like that ego death is so much different. And like Alan Watts always talked about, the more you learn and study it and understand death and you accept it, the sooner your ego leaves, because it came from nowhere and it's going nowhere.
Yeah, I've heard that. I love that.
So for me, like, I just wanted to like, it's so motivating. You leave Death Cafe and you're like, holy shit, I'm alive.
Yeah.
Right. You would think it'd be so like depressing or whatever. And like, And it was so crazy. So like the first death cafe I went to was on my 39th birthday or 40th birthday,
Okay.
the night before my 40th birthday. So it was very fascinating to like have this like milestone birthday, and where am I at when everybody else like is drinking their life away because, you know, they're like, oh my God, I'm going to turn 40 and like whatever.
Right.
And I'm standing in a, we took a tour of the new crematorium. So I'm like standing here looking at the brand new oven in the crematorium, you know, the night before my 40th birthday. And I was like, man, I was like, if you don't feel alive after this, like,
Right. And
so,
grateful and just
oh
grateful
yeah,
for
so
life.
it's incredible. Like, it's just like, just accept it, process it, like
Mhm.
talk about it, you know. And I
Mhm.
find like the more we talk about it, it helped me tremendously. Like I'd gone to 4 death cafes before my dad died,
Mm. Oh.
and it was tremendously helpful to have a conversation around it. And then I was able to be the stronger one, not really the stronger one. Everybody kind of did their part, you know, but I have siblings, my mom, and
Yeah.
but over the course of 3 years, because I watched people so much, like my whole business is around observation of people and human behavior.
Mhm.
I was watching my dad leave,
Mm.
you know, over the course of 3 or 4 years. So I was writing him
Right.
letters. Him and I would sit at the table and have conversations about death, like how he felt about it, and like, you know, if he was scared about it or anything like that. And just have these like sit at the kitchen table and talk about it. And sometimes my mom would try, you know, right at the very end, she stayed for one of our conversations. She was in the having me in the kitchen. It just kind of popped up and we started talking about it.
Yeah.
And she's always been in this denial of like, you know, nothing's, you know, he's been sick for 30 years. So like you eventually go, like, you try to blank it out, I guess. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
really
So
understand.
that you
I
can
only
keep
understand
living.
my perspective of it, not someone's like spouse or their partner in that
Mhm.
case. But for me, it was like I wanted to like say my proper goodbyes.
Mhm.
As I say, no verbal debt, like nothing left to say, just like, you
Mm.
know. So I would write him letters, we would talk and all this kind of stuff. Well, one of the, I'll share this experience on here because I mean it's pretty special. We're talking about death anyway. So
Yeah.
I've attended 5 ayahuasca ceremonies.
Okay.
So after one of my ayahuasca ceremonies, it was 2 days later that my dad had one of his biggest stroke out of the 3 that he had.
Mm.
So my now wife is now driving me to Ohio to see my dad that might not come out of this,
Mhm.
after I had just been like basically playing around on the other side, playing around in the ether, because you're,
Right.
you know, the Peruvian ayahuasca experiences are 5 hours in complete darkness.
Mm.
So you're just floating around. There's no time or space or like
Right.
anything. So it's just gone. And I go up there and I was like, everybody always knew to like give me just a moment of time at some point during while my dad was in the hospital for my own time, because I was never around all the time.
Mhm.
So I turn around, like they never told me they were leaving. I just turn around, all of a sudden nobody's in the room anymore.
Mm.
It was like, well, that's weird. And they're like, oh yeah, we wanted to give you your time. And I was like, you could have told me you were leaving.
Right.
I mean, I probably sat there. I might have been sitting there for 10 minutes and I didn't realize anybody wasn't even in there anymore. But anyways, so I was talking to my dad and I was like, you know, he started crying and he was like, you know, I'm just really scared. I'm not, you know, I'm not ready to die yet. And he was like really concerned. And I was like, thinking back now, when I look back now, like we were basically soul to soul at that point. He doesn't remember being in the hospital that whole week.
Yeah. So raw, right? So raw.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm coming off of this incredible experience, you know, basically experiencing death in my mind, in
Mhm.
my like kind of experience. And here I am talking to my dad kind of in that same space. And I was like, well, death isn't scary though. I was like, death is beautiful. You just get to go home. Like you don't have to worry about anything anymore. I was like, you've done all this stuff for the whole family. I was like, I'll still be here. Like I can help take care of everything. Everything's gonna be
Mhm.
fine. And kind of just like one thing I learned about like learning about death and talking about it is like to be very straight with the person that's dying,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they don't have an ego at that point. They don't, they can see right through your fakeness.
Yep.
They see right through your fake smile, or you're like, don't worry, everything's gonna be better next week. We'll go out for a picnic or whatever. And like,
Yep.
you know, they're reading right through that. And so we had this whole conversation. And this is one of the other reasons, like when he spent 2 weeks in a coma before he died.
Mm.
I never actually got to talk to him like in person.
Right.
And but that night when I was talking to him, he was like, yeah, it was like really overwhelming in here the other night. And I was like, you mean last night? Because this is Wednesday. And I said last night, Tuesday when I got there.
Yeah.
Because everybody was in this like weird denial thing of like dad's gonna get better or whatever. And like I didn't know what was going on. And I walk in the room and like, hey, Joe's here. And everybody starts yelling and like, hey, dad, look, Joe's here. And it was like, what are you doing? Anyways, he was like, no, on Monday. And I was like, I wasn't here yet.
Yeah.
And he hadn't woken up yet. He was unconscious.
Yeah.
But he knew what day it was. And he
Sure.
knew everybody was in the room. And he goes, everybody was being so loud and I couldn't tell them to be quiet.
Oh, yeah.
So he's like laying there trapped in his own body, basically like hearing the world around you and not being able to do anything about it. So when he was in his coma for the last 2 weeks, I, from that experience, would just talk to him like he was wide awake.
Mm-hmm.
I would just have these conversations. I would tell him things and I would like whatever. And my youngest sister, she's like, why are you talking to him like that? He's not awake. And I was like, but I know he can hear me,
Yeah.
from that first experience.
Right.
So that was Wednesday. On Sunday, we're getting ready to leave. And it was me and Bree. And I got to help like bathe him. And we changed the sheets on the bed in the hospital. And like, it was just like caring for him and like cleaning him and all this kind of stuff. And we left. He looked very regal. He was just like laying in bed, just kind of like relaxed.
Yeah.
And but I went over to him and I went to give him a hug and I was like, and I looked right in his eyes and I was like, are you still afraid of dying?
Yeah.
And he looks back and he goes, not anymore.
Oh.
And
Oh, how beautiful.
the craziest experience of that was when he was in a coma, someone on the same side of his family, her husband died of a massive heart attack, like completely unexpectedly. So I was at a funeral talking
While
to
he
his
was in a
sister
coma.
while he was in a
Okay.
coma.
Okay.
So it was really crazy. Like just the amount of times I've been through these similar experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking to his sister, and it's the only sister he had left. And she said he would come over for coffee and would just be sitting there, and he would say, well, I don't know why they brought me back last time. I don't want to be here anymore.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, wow, all right. Well, then I found out at the visitation, like 4 other people came up to me at the visitation, told me the exact same story.
Wow.
And I was like,
Ready.
was that conversation where like he wasn't afraid of dying anymore? Where he was like, hey, cool, I'm good.
Right.
I've done it. I've been like, this man was like, he would get a couple steps forward and the rug would be pulled out from under him. Like it was just constant.
Yeah.
Like I hate to think that I spent more time with my dad in the hospital than I ever did outside of the hospital sometimes. Like there was just always something. And but yeah, it was just I don't know where I want to go with that. It was just a wild experience to like hear that. Oh, what I was gonna say about it though, when he was in the coma, everybody was like trying to like, hey, dad's gonna be good. Hey, dad, come back. Like he was like cheering him on like they always do, and like waiting for him to pop his eyes open and like, here he is. And it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening, it wasn't happening. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, there's a difference right now. Because before he was afraid of dying and he was staying alive for his family and he was staying alive for all these things. And he had this will to keep fighting. And now here's a situation where I know from my conversation with his sister that he doesn't want to be here anymore. So when I went back to the hospital, it was just me in the room, and I was like, I talked to your sister Margie, and she told me what you had told her about not wanting to be here anymore. And I was like, I respect that, but the only thing I'm asking is if you can come back far enough for us to say goodbye. And the night I left, so I left before he died because I had to get back. I had crazy commitments that I just there was no way around it. Like I had to come
Sure.
back. And for me, it was more like seeing him alive meant more to me than seeing him afterwards.
Yeah.
So the night I left, I told him I had to go back, and he always knew that I had to leave because I spent more time away from home than I did there. And he locked eyes with me, and I could feel like this small little squeeze of his hand.
Mm.
So for me, that was like he came back. He was there enough to like say, "Hey, I'm here."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty wild. It was I went through the whole thing like right before COVID, and I'm sure people listening to this, and maybe even yourself,
Mm-hmm.
had somebody that may have like died right before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Like my dad had all of these things going all the time. And the first thing I processed when COVID hit, I was like, thank God dad isn't here anymore.
Yeah.
I was so grateful. But it was a weird gratitude because you never wished like to have gratitude that someone's dead.
Right. Sure.
You know, it was a very weird like process in your brain of like, wow, like I really just said that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy you're dead. But like,
Missing the suffering of the world right now.
yeah, because he
Yeah.
had no immune system. I mean, he started 30
Sure.
years without an immune system. Like, this isn't something, you
Right.
know, to be stuck in the house even more,
Yeah.
you know, and to like maybe die without anybody around you as
Yeah.
to dying with your entire family around you.
Right.
So
Where did he go?
that's what I don't know. And so there's this interesting thing. My sister-in-law, she's very sensitive to like spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wasn't around when my dad's brothers were alive. She came into the picture like years after.
Mm-hmm.
And the one night she asked my brother, who Dale, Gary, and I think Louie or something was. And he was like, those are dad's brothers.
Oh,
And
wow.
she's like, well, they're here in the room with us right now. And she never met them. She never knew their names, never knew
Right.
anything, but
Right.
like knew their names then,
Yeah.
you know. And it's like the last death cafe that we were at, there was a guy that actually had a near-death experience.
Mm.
He had the one common thing that you hear from the people that have had that, where you're like above yourself, seeing yourself in the bed.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard that?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and he goes, yeah, I surprised my daughter because I asked her after when I came out of my coma or whatever, like why you're like about painting my toenails. And she
Mm-hmm.
was like, how did you know that? And he was like, I watched the whole thing. I watched you do the whole thing.
That's amazing.
You know, so it's like, what he was like, I ended up in this giant white room. It was
Mm-hmm.
just endless white room. And I was standing there, and he goes, I saw something way far away. I had no idea what it was. But he goes, as soon as I had the thought of like, what is that over there? Like it brought me right to it.
Mm.
And he goes, it was like this orb. But the person that welcomed me was George Carlin. And I was like, okay.
Okay, then.
Yeah. But he goes, after that, he goes, once you're like there, he goes, it's like all of your, it's like the best birthday party you've ever had.
Yeah.
Like everybody you've ever known is there.
Yep.
And he goes, everybody that I've ever wanted to see again was right there.
It's amazing.
And I have a weird, like, I was brought up Catholic. So we, like, not to, like, or I mean, not to not, like, discuss religion.
Go for it. It's
I'm just
fine.
not a very religious person. I'm more
Yeah.
like, me and my wife both recognize ourselves as mystics.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's our understanding of the psychedelic world a little bit too, where that kind of brings that in. Cause like, for me, I could never figure out like why I never had the same experience when people were out like taking a psychedelic or like on LSD or whatever, and they're all this like all out like seeing crazy things and talking about crazy things, and I'm like sitting in the corner lost in my head.
Yeah.
I was always lost inside,
Mm.
you know. And Bree's the same way. I get lost inside. You like we like to play outside too, but like for the most part, if I use a psychedelic, I get lost inside.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized over the course of the last 10 years of like understanding the medicines and trying different ones and like different experiences, that um that you're basically finding God within self. you're going inwards, and like you're clearing out all this karma and all this, like, all, you know, with ayahuasca especially, you're going back through ancestral karma. You're like trying to clear out the bad things from people behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a phrase I always like in that world where they're like, you know, we are our grandmother's dreams.
Mm.
And I've always really liked that one, because like we are like this, like everything about that is going backwards.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Have you ever heard of the hypnotherapist Michael Newton?
No.
He is he wrote a few books, one of them called Journey of Souls. And it's his work working with people doing past life regression. And then he would transition from their most recent past life into interlife hypnotherapy. So he's asking, okay, so you've gone into the white light, what now? And he did thousands and
Gotcha.
thousands of case studies of
Huh.
and reported in great detail what people would say in trance about their interlife. It's fascinating.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as I
There was,
read those books, I was like, okay, I'm good with death.
yeah. Well, that's what, like, the idea for me is like, you know, to become deathless, or like, you know, death is meaningless,
Mm-hmm.
because we're really not, we're like, our physical self is leaving, this container that we're in is leaving.
Sure. Yeah.
But like today, try this really, I had one of my clients, she's been a psychoanalyst for like 45 years, something like that. And she kind of brought this up without even like, I don't remember, we were talking about death, I think, or something like that, or someone that just died. And the she kind of just brought this up, and she's like, yeah, like some people live and they just like, or like when they lose somebody, they still like talk to them like they're still around, like
Mhm.
talk to them like they're still there, like talk to their spirits and whatever. Well, I have this I promote runaway spots for adults. Like, have your spot where you like just go to and you scream and you cry and you like whatever you got to do, and like, you know,
Yep.
that's your safe space. So I have like different variations, from like a spot in my house
Mm-hmm.
to a rock down at the creek that it's like maybe a 6-minute walk. Then I go to the forest, which is a 15-minute drive and a 2-mile hike to
Mm.
go to my spot. Or I go to the lake, which is 45-minute drive, and then I stay overnight.
Yep.
So it depends on like where I'm at and what I need,
Yep.
on how deep I go. And so I have this spot out at the forest that I go to. My runaway spot out there is, that's where I went when my dad was dying.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I went when my dad died.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I go to talk to my dad
Mm-hmm.
and like connect with him there. Well, then it turned out to be this spot that I take I brought my friend Mike to,
Mm.
that died, and I brought my friend Jan and my friend's dog Luke that I really liked, and now my friend Basil from like a couple of weeks ago, and like I bring them out there and I introduce them to everybody else.
Mm.
And sometimes for Mike's birthday, I brought some whiskey out there, and we all had a little bit of whiskey, and like we all hung out, and I played some music, and like, but I engaged with those spirits,
Yeah.
talk to them, and like, you know, introduce each other, and like, hey, now you guys are all going to be here together, and you know, and but I go out there and I go through, I don't just say, hey, everybody. I'm like, I go through each one and I acknowledge them, and I was like, you know, hey, hope everything's are good, like here's what's going on in my life, you know, I know you're
Mhm.
around, and like, you know, have those conversations. And I told her, I was like, why do that? Like, I talk to I have all these people, they have a whole party going on out there, you know, where I go, and like that's my spot, you know. And I'm highly emotionally regulated. So like sometimes I can come across robotic or mechanized to people,
Mhm.
because I really don't have emotional like outbursts or reactions or anything to like much.
Mhm.
But when I go out there, like those are my triggers. Those are my like, I want to cry.
Yeah.
Like I go out there to like know that I brought my people out there, and like I got out there, I wasn't even out there like 3 minutes, and I was just like choking up, because it was like I'm back, and I hadn't been out there like over a month. So, but yeah, so today I went out there because I have a lot of really big things happening right now, and I'm not really sure like where it's all going or how it's all going to play out. But the biggest thing that I've had to like really put a lot of effort into is the surrendering part.
Mm-hmm.
You realize that like there's a Robert Sapolsky, when in one of his lectures, when someone did a Q&A at the end, they asked about free will in a very roundabout way. They were trying to get the question to him without like actually saying free will.
Sure.
And he was like, oh, the free will thing. He's like, I was expecting that, but like I was hoping we're gonna avoid it tonight. And because there's a guy, Aaron Apke. I don't know if you've ever listened to his stuff. He's one of my favorites on YouTube.
No.
He talks about surrender, and he talks about like, there is no free will. There's like relative free will because you still have a choice.
Sure.
Each choice is based on conditioning, and the conditioning from all your genetic expression and your circumstances and whatever that are going to like, do you choose the apple or the donut?
Mm-hmm.
But we still don't know by choosing the apple 10,000 steps down the way, like what choosing that apple did.
Right.
Right. So like there isn't really free will. So then finding Robert Sapolsky talking about it in science, saying, because I was questioning, I was like, well, spiritual stuff, it's all like, it's what you believe, and it's like what you like, is it real? Is it not real? Is it like, and I'm listening to him explain all this stuff in science and in epigenetics and the genome and like the genetic expressions and all these things. And he's like, the free will question came up. He goes, basically, we have the amount of free will to decide whether you're going to floss your top teeth or your bottom teeth first.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it's already written. It's already like, it's just expanding.
Right. Yeah. Ram Dass talks about that a lot, of how everything's unfolding karmically, and to be conscious is to just be able to see how it's all unfolding and accept it, be like, oh, I see how everything's playing out. Okay. I'm on board with it, rather than being in resistance to it.
Right. Don't fight life. Just flow with life.
Yeah.
So like I said this someone the other day. I have these weird like Joeisms that pop out. And it was like, discipline is like your surfboard in the waves of life. So like everything's just in flow, like nature and change, and like it's like in a giant ocean. So you can either bob around in the ocean and not have any control of anything, or you can like, to me, like setting very specific disciplines. I do certain things every single day. Like I wake up pretty much the same time and go to bed at the same time, and I do a lot of very specific things at certain times. And to me, that's like your decision, the little bit of control that we do have is saying like, these are the things that I set in place for myself. And then the rest of it can flow around it. Just kind of like, you're like just setting some rocks into the channel. You're saying this rock needs to stay here. This rock needs to stay here, and this one.
Right.
Well, you can't build a dam because then you're resisting.
Right.
But to me, I can set a couple rocks in very specific places and say like, hey, I wake up at 7 a.m. I go to bed at midnight every day.
Oh my gosh.
7 days a
really?
week. Yeah.
I don't know how you stay up that late.
Well, because I can't sleep at that. So because sleep to me is like it's this chess game of like, how much of this do I take with that, or like, do I want to use this tonight and that, or just this tonight?
Sure.
So for most of my life, I would only get 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I spent most of my life very awake. And then now that and they would just, before the VA, they would just give me more and more stimulants. Like, here, I guess you need more to stay awake. You need more to stay awake. Well, then you just keep building this resistance to it, or like this tolerance to it.
Right.
So the VA goes, well, let's try this. And they gave me this Xyrem, which is like GHB.
Okay.
And they're like, why don't you try this? And I've been on that for about 10 years now. And it knocks you out. Like in the beginning, it knocked me out really well.
Yeah.
And you would take it twice a night, has an active time of 2.5 to 4 hours. And you take it twice a night. So you have to wake up in the middle of the night, and then you drink it and pass back out again.
Right.
So starting to take that, but now that my brain like thinks through intoxication very quickly. And I don't really know any other way of really explaining that other than like, I was an alcoholic for a long time, like better of 10 years where, a fifth of booze a night was like, run of the mill.
Yeah.
And, but I was like, you never act drunk. You never act like, I could always do whatever I needed to do. I'd always acted like I had my everything together and like what I needed to do. I mean,
very functional. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I was managing 50 people under me and running a $9 million logistics account as an alcoholic, right? So it was like, I could be wasted with my friends at 2 a.m. and they call me for a work thing and I'll be on the phone for an hour, like solving a logistical puzzle.
Amazing. Yeah.
So, but the same thing plays into the medications I take to sleep, because it's like they work for like 2 or 3 times and then they don't work.
Yeah.
So then I have to take a break and I try something else and that'll work a little bit. Or I can take,
Yeah. So you're always trying to find the harmony,
yeah.
most harmonious thing. The
Yeah.
thing
So I've
that
been getting
works.
decent sleep lately, but it's like now I've learned that I can actually add up to 30 milligrams of melatonin
Yeah.
with anything that I take. So that's actually helped. Like,
Cool.
it's that extra little boost to the GHB or to the clozapam, or like maybe just that. And sometimes I can stay asleep. So I'm just like, I lay there awake, and I've everything I've built for like my company and like our group that we have for our festival group that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I just do it while I'm sleeping, and then I wake up and I write it all down, and then I go back to sleep.
Oh, it's so cool. Yeah, I always think of sleep as death,
So do I.
basically
It's just
dying
start the
every
next
night.
day. Yeah. If you're born every morning, yeah, you're born every morning. You have this like set amount of time, and it's like each one's this set amount of life you have,
Right.
and you just like do everything you can. But like the biggest lesson I took, especially from the pandemic, was I used do everything you can as long as you can, as fast as you can, as much as you can, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
As my lovely coping mechanism of like not dealing with the things that are troubling me.
Sure. Yeah.
So now it's like, do the things that you feel called to do. Like,
Yeah.
being creates doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess that's the surrender. Oh, 1 second.
Okay. Somebody's calling you.
Yeah, someone tried to call in. That's the surrender thing. It's like
Right.
being creates doing. And if you can settle into just being, you'll know what you have to do without having to chase your tail all day long and do all the other things.
Yeah. I think that's true for me too. The quieter that I am, the more opportunity I give myself to have some space, the more I know what the heck the next step is, the next right thing.
That's always like the Rumi's quote: when you walk out onto the way will appear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like just staying present enough. Like I always explain that one to people as like driving in dense fog.
Mm-hmm.
So if you drive slow enough, you can see where the road turns, because you can see like the 5 or 10 feet in front of you. But if you drive too fast, then you can miss a curve.
True. Yeah.
Right. And then you made the wrong decision or whatever. And now you'll eventually end up back on your path. Because I don't think making the wrong decision doesn't take us off our path. I think it just like, it kind of sends you off a little bit and then it brings you back.
Mm.
Something's going to bring it back. Something's like, I think we have some, then I'm not surrendering again. It's the weird thing about like, we can still make the decision, but
Right.
or a decision. But I
I'm
feel
not
like
sure
all the
we
crazy
ever.
decisions I've made to figure out where I wanted to go, and it
Yeah.
kept putting me back to where I'm at.
I don't know that I've ever actually fallen off of a path. I don't even know if that's possible anymore. Like to me, that is a nonsense idea. This idea that we can not ever be doing exactly what is appropriate for us.
Yeah. No,
Just where I've
I think
landed
our
now.
like the guy that I'm working with as my business coach right now, it's when you find the person you're supposed to find, they actually understand, they can hear what you're saying and actually help you interpret what's going on.
Yeah.
And him and I both came to the same conclusion in his life and my life right now, because we found each other at this like perfect time or whatever.
Mhm.
And but we both realize we're so far into what we're working on, each of us are in our own thing, that there isn't anything we can do wrong anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing, because like I still make a decision, but like whatever decision you make isn't going to take you anywhere off remotely even close to in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I had that awareness at some point that it switched from an efforting to, oh, I'm just being carried. I'm being carried along.
Yeah, it's like this, like, yeah, it's a peacefulness.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other day I had this like point, you call it nirvana, call it like the kingdom of God in you, or there's so many other words for it.
Sure.
Sartori. But the other day I was standing in the kitchen, and I went through this thought process of like, I did this work. I've been working on the same thing for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked almost every day of my life since I was a child, learning all the stuff that I used to build the thing that I built. So I carried my cross
Mm-hmm.
very well for the last 3 decades of my life. I built a thing that has enough value to it, undeniably, because it was 4 years ago estimated at $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this thing that would allow you at some point in your life to literally buy anything you could possibly ever dream of, plus more. But then I realized I didn't want anything more than I already had.
Yeah. Isn't that the irony of it all?
So it was this whole thing where I was like, I hit this like pivotal level of like gratitude
Yep.
and desirelessness and choiceless,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, for like the next couple of days, I didn't know what choice to make, because I was like, I don't think I have really a place to make a choice. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what to answer,
No
because
preferences, no
yeah,
desires, no, yeah, no point, that is tricky, isn't it?
yeah. I was like, wait, I still have to do the thing. I still have to like make the relative free will choices of like this or
Right.
that, don't
Yeah.
I? I mean,
Right.
I guess it's like whatever you find like, I don't want to say pleasure in, but I guess
Right.
we're allowed to have pleasure. We're allowed to like, as long as we don't like put all our eggs in the pleasure, but
Sure.
like, to find the meaning in the suffering.
I want to ask you something before we have to go.
Oh yeah, we're running out of time.
I know we can just keep going, right?
We can always do
um,
another one.
that's true. If anyone else was interested in learning about dying, or if maybe they don't have a death cafe near them, or do you have resources that you have enjoyed that other people might enjoy? Books that you've
Um,
read or people that you follow?
I haven't really got into reading. Um, I really utilize YouTube a lot,
Cool.
because it can really take you down the paths that you need. I feel like the way I was explained, this is how I learn in channels.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, I use the machine learning and the algorithms and everything to allow me to learn faster and more.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would suggest is like dive deep, like start searching it, Googling it.
Google
Um,
death.
yeah, like
Okay,
what
that's a
happens
good
when you
one.
die, or like, how does like being cremated work, or how does like, start to learn about it and like really absorb those things. And like, I, I suggest, this is only my opinion, to not get too lost in the spiritual stuff, just strictly spiritual stuff. Find out
Sure.
what happens to your body.
Yeah.
Find out different ways. Like I didn't know until I was at the last Death Cafe about water cremation
Mm.
or
Hmm.
liquid cremation. I always thought we just burned people. Like that was the only way to
Right.
cremate somebody.
Yeah.
But no, you can be put in this tub and these chemicals added to it, and it basically turns you into liquid.
Oh, interesting. Is it a poisonous liquid?
No, it's
I
supposed
mean,
to
is
be
it like
more.
acid or something?
Yeah, but it's actually more earth friendly than even
Than the
the burn
ashes.
cremation, than the ashes.
Fascinating. Oh, okay.
And now they're doing composting, where you can have your
Yeah.
body composted,
Yep.
like in the green burial. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't get a lot. The spiritual part is like amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and learning the deathless and be able to surrender and all that.
Mm.
And I really appreciate it. Um, but for me, like I'm such a logistical person. Like I know that I'll never actually know the answer, and that was one of the hardest things that I ever had to process, was giving up that control, that you'll never actually know the answer.
Right.
You can speculate, and religion can tell you it's this, and this religion can tell you it's that, and whatever, but
Yeah.
like in the end, like nobody ever came back to tell you what
Yeah. And
actually
even if
happened.
you've
So
had a near-death experience, or, like me, I've gone into trance and relived my dying and relived my interlife and relived all of that. Even that is simply
It's still some speculation to it,
it's
you know.
speculation and in a illusory it's kind of experience. I mean, it's essentially my ego perceiving, my brain, my human neurology telling me a story.
Right.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So yeah, so that's all I say is just like balance the getting lost in the fairy tale and
Sure.
the mystery of it
Yeah.
with the science of it.
Cool.
And understanding what happens to your body, what happens, you know, like learn about Ask a Mortician. Do you know about her?
Mm-mm. The
That's a
YouTube channel.
yeah, it's a YouTube channel.
Okay.
Bree watches that one a lot, and she goes deep
Huh.
into like um you know what you actually have to do, and it is like being embalmed actually like required, and a lot of it's just pushed onto people,
Right.
you know,
Tradition.
and like traditions. Like my favorite one is traditions are just peer pressure from dead people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
like I would say is like if you're following a tradition that you hate and the person that started the tradition isn't here, isn't it like a dead person disrespecting your boundary?
Sure.
It's like I'm not saying don't do the tradition. If you love the tradition
Yeah.
you're doing, by all
Yeah.
means do it. Don't ever stop.
Right.
But if you don't like it, then you're literally letting someone that isn't here anymore still dictate your life.
Yep. I agree with you. That was an important, I remember seeing that meme and being like, oh God, yeah. Well, there's a huge list of things that I don't like doing that is going away.
Right? We're just gonna shelf that.
Yeah. Like writing out Christmas cards.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I just hate that so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Bree does a lot of birthday cards. So she's big in like I do thank you cards and stuff like that. But like mass mailings of things like that, I'm like,
Yeah. No.
no.
Nowadays with social media, you don't really need to connect that way. There's plenty of access to like what's been going on with you and
Yeah. I
access
still
to
think there's
photos.
like an energy exchange of like the I touched it, you touched it.
Yeah, you make
You
a
know,
good
because I like
point.
the idea of I had this thing called drive-by huggings where
Mhm.
like you only have 5 minutes to hang out. Like, cool. It's just like face to face. We can grab a hug, quick hello, and we can both take off and do our thing.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, it's kind of like I always see like humans as like the Tesla ball, where like there's like little zaps.
Hmm.
We just come together and we create this little zap, and then we go back out again.
Right.
Where that letter, my hand created this thing. I
Hmm.
touched it. I cared for it. I delivered it to where it needed to go to get to you.
Hmm.
And now you're doing some action to undo what I gave you and read it.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying with like the social media, and like it's a beautiful way to keep in touch with people, but I still feel like there's like I grew up at the very tail end of this in Ohio where, you know, as a little kid where like you'd pull into the gas station, the guy would come out when you're a little kid and give you a piece of gum and you clean your windshield and like check the air in your tires and stuff like that, like full service.
Yep.
You know, and that care, that level of service that we would give to people.
Hmm.
And I
Of
crave it. I
connection.
miss it. Like, and that's one of the biggest things in my practice that I'm like, I love technology. Like, obviously, I'm building a product that's going to use machine learning to help with healthcare.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
like, I love technology, but the human element we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like people are craving connection right now more than ever.
Yeah. And find the ways that don't piss you off to do that.
Right. Right. And all we're doing right now is we're talking about the metaverse now. We're going to just
Yeah.
live as avatars in this metaverse. And I was like, oh my God, we keep going. We're going to always, we're just going to continue to go into the invisible. We're going to live in the quantum. We're going to like only know each other by these weird avatars that we have. And we don't actually see anybody's faces anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's wild.
Well, some of that for me has, I never felt isolated in COVID because I don't um, feel constrained by my physical body. And I don't necessarily need interaction with my physical body in order to feel connected. But I think the vast majority of people are identified with their body and will love like you said, the hand wrote this letter and I received this. I mean, it's very important to my parents. It's very important to a lot of people. I
Yeah.
totally get that.
I know where you're coming from too. Like I connect with so many people like just in the ether. Like you're like, wow, I was just thinking about you. Like, yeah, I was thinking about you too, like, or whatever. Or like, when you're around like the mirror neurons, when you're around the same person for so long, and you start to like finish the sentences because you're like thinking the same thing. You're so together
Yeah, so intimate.
on your path that you're like literally just things are like interlacing with each other.
Yeah. What an amazing talk.
No,
Thank
it's been great.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I really enjoyed it. Like, I'm glad the death thing came up because I was
Me
like,
too.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by it too. I've read lots of books and attended a death doula conference and did a lot of work with that.
I think we get
like,
new people more comfortable with it.
yeah,
We've sterilized humanity.
yeah,
We don't talk about anything gross. We don't want to see dead people. We
yeah.
want the dead person to look as alive as they possibly can.
Unless it's in a video game, and then we want it to be as bloody and gory as possible.
Oh yeah. No, exactly.
As long as it's behind a screen.
right. I don't want to see it in real life. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think we really need to like bring back, like really like embrace that. And that's why like a death cafe, like we always talk about like the verbiage,
Yeah.
getting away from saying, like, the biggest one is to get away from to say died by suicide and not committed suicide,
Mm,
because they didn't commit there's nothing against the law that they did. They didn't.
right.
You're like demonizing them for what they did by
Mhm.
saying they committed this thing, like you committed a crime or you committed a sin
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
And you're like taking away this person's any legacy they had is now like, oh well, they're trash because they committed suicide.
Yeah. That's just a misunderstanding of suicide and of death. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of
So
death.
like we're always like, you just died by suicide, and like that was the thing that I learned a lot about stoicism, and stoics are really big on like on suicide, where you're like, if you're just done, you've done your thing and you're just tired of the whole thing, just
It's
yeah,
okay.
just stop. Yeah, you have the switch, just use the switch.
Yeah.
And like, that's a whole different topic too, like the assisted suicide, or like,
Oh yeah. We treat our animals better than our humans. It's amazing.
yeah. There's actually I'll add this one on here too, because we actually watched this documentary at Death Cafe, and it was like, I think it was like 5 New Ways to Die in America.
Hmm.
And it was really fascinating. It actually showed like your ashes being shot up in a rocket into space.
Mhm.
It had the living wake, which I really love, which is like
Oh
somebody
yeah.
that knows they're terminal.
Yeah.
This guy was like, why would I want everybody to see me after I'm dead? I want to see them before I
Yeah.
die. So they had this whole wake, like a giant, like almost like as big as a wedding.
Yeah.
And you got to like hear from everybody and interact with everybody and like
Oh, that's
whatever. And then
incredible.
like, yeah, it was like, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
If they're leaving, why not celebrate the fact that they're leaving and that they've had an amazing life, and here's all the people that gathered to
Like a
see.
retirement party.
Yeah, exactly.
You're retiring from this body.
Yeah, but there's an engineer from Silicon Valley that did the assisted suicide,
Mm.
and he wanted everybody to see all of it. So you actually watch him drink it and watch him like die on the couch and like take his last breath and everything, and like take you to the story, help build his own coffin, and like be a part of the whole process.
Honoring the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah.
Well, when I put this up, if you have any particular YouTube channels or things that you think people would enjoy, maybe we could like link them, and I'll link ideas that I have underneath in the comments, and that way people can begin. They might have a place to begin.
Yeah.
You cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to pop this up as soon as I can.
Awesome.
Probably in a few hours.
Awesome.
Okay. Hope you have
I
a
really
good rest
appreciate
of your
it.
day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.